Welcome back. Now, when we started this course, I pointed out that the law of commercial transactions is what enables the world that we live in today. And this is clearly shown when we start to study the law of secured transactions. Secured transactions give to all of us a lifestyle that we would not otherwise have. We are able to live in houses that we own, but which are subject to a bank security interest. We drive automobiles, which we own, but which are subject to a bank security interest. And all of that is made possible because of this framework regarding the law of secured transactions. So, what is a secured transaction? Well, a creditor who wishes to protect itself will take a security interest in collateral belonging to the debtor, which is to say a lender who is going to lend money will often seek some sort of security. And they will do that by taking a security interest in collateral belonging to the debtor. So it's the debtor's property, but the creditor actually has a superior interest in that property. Now, secured transactions are governed by Article 9 of the UCC. And without security in the form of collateral, lenders would simply be unsecured creditors who would have a low priority during bankruptcy. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about this collateral, but the collateral used to secure a loan must fit within one of the categories specified under Article 9. So today we're going to examine Article 9, its terminology and its operations. After this lecture, you should be able to answer the following questions. What are the important definitions associated with secured transactions? How are secured interests created? What does it mean to perfect a security interest? And what is the purpose of perfection? Let's start with classifications of collateral in a secured transaction. Now again, what is a secured transaction? Secured transactions involve an agreement, a contract, which we often refer to as a financing agreement between a lender, who will become the creditor, and the borrower, who will become the debtor. And in this agreement, the borrower pledges its assets to secure the loan. So it will pledge property that it owns to the lender in order to facilitate the loaning of money from the lender to the borrower. So secured transactions can induce a lender to loan money where it would not do so if it simply had to rely on a claim for breach of contract. If there is no secured property, then the lender becomes simply an unsecured creditor and will stand in line with all of the other unsecured creditors in the event of the borrower's default. If the borrower doesn't repay the loan, the lender would simply stand in the same line as your credit cards, as your landlord, as any number of other unsecured creditors. So, from a lender's perspective, much better to be a secured lender, a secured creditor. Let's talk a little bit about these categories. Now, your book spends a lot of time talking about the categories. I'm really interested in the categories into which goods fall, because goods has been the subject matter of this course. So, goods that are subject to a security interest would fall within one of four categories. First of all, consumer goods. Any item that you're using for your personal or household use, appliances, jewelry, artwork, automobiles, obviously. Automobiles probably the most common type of secured collateral. Farm products. Farmers will often pledge seeds and crops to a lender to encourage the lender to loan them money so that they can then plant the seeds and harvest the resulting plants. Inventory, and inventory is any item that is intended for sale. So inventory is those things that I intend to sell through my operation of my business. And finally, equipment. Equipment is the things that we use to support our business operations. They are not inventory. These are not the things we're going to sell. These are the things that are going to allow us to conduct business. So obviously, best example, computers. An employer may own thousands of computers, but they're not a merchant for computers. They use computers to support the sale of their product. Now, there are other categories of collateral, and again, I encourage you to read the textbook to find out more about these. First would be financial products, things like negotiable instruments, which are to say promissory notes, and checking accounts. I can pledge either of those as part of a security agreement. And then there are what we call the intangibles, generally intellectual property, patents, trademarks, copyrights. I can pledge those to secure a loan. Now, a security interest will cover property that's in the debtor's possession, but in fact, it could reach property that was not in existence at the time of the original extension of credit. A security interest can reach other types of property, and we're going to talk about these four specifically. And the first is what we call proceeds. And we'll talk about each more of these in more detail. Let me go ahead and tell you what they are. Proceeds, after acquired property, future advances, and then what we call a floating lien. Now, what are proceeds? Proceeds is comprised of the money or any other valuable asset received when collateral is sold or otherwise disposed of. So if I have a car, if I have an automobile that is subject to a lender's security interest, and I sell that car to my friend, and I get money for the sale of the car, and I go put that money in my bank account, the creditor can seize that money because it represents the proceeds received from the sale of the collateral. If I am a farmer and I have fields of grain that form a security interest with a lender, and I sell that grain to a third party, the lender can seize the money that I received from that sale. So proceeds. After acquired property is property that the debtor acquired after the execution of the security agreement, meaning the security agreement is going to cover property that may not even be in existence at the time the security agreement is executed. And this type of protection is useful for inventory financing arrangements. Many times a retailer will give to the lender a security interest in their inventory. And that security interest is broad enough to cover the inventory that existed at the time of the agreement, as well as the items that flow into the inventory after the execution of the agreement. The third type is future advances. And this generally occurs with what's called a line of credit loan. And you may have heard this, you may have had one. And essentially what a line of credit does is that a borrower establishes the ability to borrow money from a lender at various times and in various amounts up to some maximum. So I can set up a line of credit loan with my bank, say for $25,000, and I would be able to draw against that $25,000 intermittently. If I have pledged security to that lender, if I have pledged my car, for instance, in exchange for that line of credit loan, then as I withdraw against the line of credit, as I borrow against the line of credit, that line of credit, those funds are subject to the security interest in the same collateral that secured the initial loan. So advances against a line of credit can be subject to a properly perfected security interest. And we'll talk about perfection in just a minute. And finally, the floating lien. This is a type of lien, a security interest in collateral that occurs even when the collateral may change in character or classification or location. If the collateral moves from equipment and then then that is placed into a bank account, sold and placed in a bank account, then the bank account is subject to a financial product claim. So even though the collateral may change in character or location or classification, the security interest still arises. And again, floating liens are commonly used in the financing of inventories. As goods come into and out of an inventory, the floating lien is going to stretch to cover all those. The floating lien can apply to a shifting stock of goods.